China's breaking world records you didn't even know existed. We're talking about the longest, tallest, most impossible mega projects ever built. And they're not stopping. Right now, there are structures being completed that make anything in the West look like a practice run. Forget what you think is possible in engineering, because what you're about to see rewrites the limits of human construction. And we're starting with a bridge so long you could drive for 2 hours and still not reach the end. 18. Danyang Kunshan Grand Bridge. You're looking at 102 miles of concrete and steel. That's the longest bridge on planet Earth. To put that in perspective, you could drive from Philadelphia to New York City and still be on the same bridge. The Danyang Kunshan Grand Bridge carries high-speed trains at 186 miles per hour between Beijing and Shanghai. It doesn't just cross a river. It crosses rice paddies, canals, lakes, and rivers for over 100 miles without touching the ground. 9,000 concrete piers holding up this impossibly long structure. 4 years. That's how long it took 10,000 workers to build what seems physically impossible. They poured concrete 24 hours a day, every single day, racing against a deadline that would have crushed any other nation's infrastructure capacity. And here's what makes it insane. This isn't even the most impressive bridge China's built, because there's another one that doesn't just break records for length. 17. Shanghai Maglev. It breaks them for pure, terrifying speed. Picture this. You're sitting in a train with no wheels. Nothing is touching the track beneath you. You're floating on magnetic force alone. And then you accelerate to 268 miles per hour. The Shanghai Maglev is the fastest commercial train service on Earth. It covers 19 miles from the airport to downtown Shanghai in just 7 minutes. That's faster than most people drive on a highway, and you're doing it while hovering above the ground. Here's the part that makes your stomach drop. At full speed, the train is levitating 10 millimeters above the track, using electromagnets powerful enough to suspend 90 tons of steel and passengers in midair. There's no friction, no wheel noise. Just the sound of air rushing past at speeds that would get you arrested on any road in America. The G-forces during acceleration push you back into your seat like a fighter jet. Passengers who aren't ready for it genuinely feel like they're on a rocket launch. And China built this not as a test track, but as daily public transportation that millions of people use like it's normal. But speed is one thing. Height is where fear becomes visceral. 16. Jinping I Dam. Because China just built a wall of concrete taller than the Chrysler Building. You're standing at the base of the Jinping I Dam, and you have to tilt your head back until your neck hurts just to see the top. 1,000 feet straight up. That's the world's tallest dam, a 305-meter wall holding back the entire Yalong River in one of the most seismically active regions on Earth. 7.6 million cubic meters of concrete. Imagine filling every apartment in Manhattan with concrete, from floor to ceiling. That's the scale we're talking about. And they poured it into a narrow mountain gorge, where earthquakes aren't a possibility, they're a guarantee. The pressure at the base is incomprehensible. The weight of water pressing against that dam could crush a submarine like a tin can. Engineers had to account for forces that would shatter normal concrete, so they developed new reinforcement techniques specifically for this project. One crack, one miscalculation, and you're looking at a catastrophic flood that would devastate everything downstream. But it's holding, generating 3,600 megawatts of power. Enough electricity to power millions of homes from a structure that shouldn't be able to exist in an earthquake zone. And if you think that's high, China built a bridge that makes this dam look like it's sitting in a ditch. 15. Duge Bridge. Because there's a bridge in China that's higher off the ground than the Empire State Building is tall. The Duge Bridge sits 1,854 feet above the Beipan River. That's 565 meters of empty air between the road deck and the valley floor below. If you fell from this bridge, you would be in freefall for over 20 seconds before hitting the water. You're driving across at highway speed, and if you look over the edge, the river below looks like a thin blue thread. Cars on the opposite valley wall look like toys. The entire structure is so high that clouds sometimes pass beneath it. Here's what makes it nightmare fuel for engineers. This isn't a vertical tower, it's a suspension bridge spanning 4,400 feet across a gorge that was considered unbuildable. The towers alone rise 820 feet from the valley floor. The cables holding up the roadway have to account for wind shear that changes dramatically between the top and bottom of the structure. They built this in Guizhou Provincia region, so mountainous and remote that the bridge was the only way to connect two sides of a gorge without adding 4 hours of driving. So they just built higher than anyone thought possible. And that's just vertical height. Wait until you see what happens when China decides to go horizontal across open ocean. 14. Beijing Grand Bridge. The Beijing Grand Bridge stretches for 48.15 kilometers, that's 29.9 miles of elevated viaduct carrying high-speed trains between Beijing and Shanghai. You could drive from downtown Boston to the New Hampshire border and still be on the same structure. This isn't crossing water. This is pure elevation strategy. The entire bridge exists because Chinese engineers refuse to let their high-speed rail slow down. For any not roads, not rivers, not communities, not farmland. So they lifted the entire railway into the air and kept it there for 30 miles straight. Every single pier had to be earthquake resistant. Every connection point had to handle trains weighing thousands of tons passing overhead at 186 miles per hour. The tolerances are so precise that the slightest settlement in any foundation could derail a train carrying hundreds of passengers. And they built it as part of a larger railway project without even making a big deal about it. Just casually constructed the world's second longest bridge like it was a routine infrastructure checkbox. But length isn't the only way to dominate the ocean. Sometimes you have to go under it. 13. Shanghai Tower. Before we go underwater, let's go straight up into the clouds. You're standing inside an elevator in Shanghai Tower. The doors close. And then you experience the fastest vertical ride on planet Earth. 20.5 meters per second. That's 74 kilometers per hour straight up. You're traveling 128 floors in 55 seconds, and your stomach is somewhere around the 60th floor trying to catch up with the rest of your body. Shanghai Tower isn't just tall at 632 meters, it's engineered to twist. The entire building rotates 120 degrees from bottom to top, like a giant corkscrew piercing the sky. This isn't for aesthetics. It's to cut wind loads by 24%, because at that height, typhoon winds hit with enough force to rip apart a normal skyscraper. The observation deck at 562 meters is the highest in the world inside a building. You're standing above the clouds, looking down at planes taking off below you. On a clear day, you can see 50 miles in every direction, and the entire city of Shanghai looks like a model train set. But here's the terrifying part. The foundation sits in soft soil, the kind of ground engineers have nightmares about. So they drilled 955 foundation piles down to bedrock, some going 86 meters deep, just to anchor this twisting giant so it doesn't sink into the mud. And those elevators? They're not just fast, they're pressurized like airplane cabins because the speed creates enough air pressure change to blow out your eardrums. But even this engineering marvel isn't China's most ambitious connection project. 12. Hong Kong, Zhuhai, Macau Bridge. China built a 34-mile bridge that disappears underwater. The Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge crosses open ocean, but in the middle, it dives beneath the waves and becomes a tunnel. 4 miles underwater, the longest subsea tunnel on Earth. Why? The world's busiest shipping lane runs right through here. So they built artificial islands in the middle of the ocean and continued as a tunnel 130 feet below the surface. You're driving with cargo ships passing overhead, the weight of the South China Sea pressing down. The tunnel sections weigh 80,000 tons each. They floated them into position, sunk them into trenches on the ocean floor, and connected them underwater with millimeter precision. 9 years of construction through typhoons and earthquakes. Now you can drive from Hong Kong to Macau in 30 minutes instead of a 4-hour ferry ride. But if you think that's extreme, wait until you see how they build the most impressive airport in the world. Beijing Daxing International Airport. China built the largest airport terminal ever constructed in just 4 years. Beijing Daxing's terminal is 7.5 million square feet, under one roof bigger than 98 football fields. No matter where your gate is, you're never more than an 8-minute walk from security. The roof is supported by just 8 columns. 8. The rest is pure engineering, holding up a structure that weighs as much as a small city. Underneath the terminal is a high-speed rail station where trains traveling 217 miles per hour pull directly beneath the airport. Step off a train, walk to your gate in minutes. 100 million passengers per year. That's the entire population of Germany moving through annually, managed by AI-controlled traffic systems because humans can't track that many planes. But even this pales in comparison to what China built on a river. Three Gorges Dam. China built a wall that holds back an entire ocean's worth of water. This is the largest dam in the world. The Three Gorges Dam is the largest concrete structure ever built. 27 million cubic meters of concrete, generating 22,500 megawatts, enough electricity to power California, Texas, and Florida combined. The reservoir behind it is 410 miles long. The weight of that much water actually slowed Earth's rotation by 0.06 microseconds. The dam literally changed how fast our planet spins. 1.4 million people were relocated. 13 cities, 140 towns, and over 1,300 villages disappeared underwater when they closed the gates. If that structure failed, a 60-foot wall of water would obliterate everything for hundreds of miles downstream. But it's engineered to withstand a 1 in 10,000 year flood, and it's been holding for over 20 years. 9. Qinghai-Tibet Railway. China built a railway where humans aren't supposed to survive. The Qinghai-Tibet Railway reaches 16,640 feet above sea level at Tanggula Pass. That's higher than any mountain in the lower 48 states. You're closer to space than to normal air pressure. At that altitude, every breath gives you 40% less oxygen than at sea level. People die up there. Not from accidents, from simply existing. Altitude sickness can kill you in hours. Your blood thickens. Your brain swells. Climbers spend weeks acclimatizing to reach heights like this. But China just casually runs passenger trains through it every single day. The trains are pressurized like aircraft. Oxygen is pumped into every car. If the system fails, passengers have minutes before they start losing consciousness. There are oxygen masks at every seat and medical staff on every train because the altitude will kill you faster than you can call for help. But the real nightmare was building it. 1,200 miles of railway, 960 of those miles above 13,000 feet, 675 bridges. Over 340 miles of track laid directly on permafrost ground. That's frozen solid, but melts if you warm it even slightly. Here's the problem. Trains generate heat, friction. The weight of locomotives compresses the ground. All of that threatens to melt the permafrost, which would cause the entire railway to sink into mud and collapse. So engineers had to install cooling systems under the track's actual refrigeration pipes buried in the ground to keep the permafrost frozen, even as trains weighing thousands of tons pass overhead. Construction crews worked in conditions where frostbite happens in minutes and altitude sickness was guaranteed. They built at elevations where helicopters struggle to fly. And they finished the highest railway on Earth in just 5 years. But this was just one railway line. China was about to scale that achievement to something incomprehensible. 8. China High-Speed Rail Network. China didn't just build one impossible railway. They built more than the entire rest of the world combined. 28,000 miles of high-speed rail. That's 45,000 kilometers of tracks where trains routinely hit 217 miles per hour. To put that in perspective, if you laid out America's high-speed rail network, you'd have exactly 0 miles. Europe and Japan combined? Still less than China built in the last 15 years. You can board a train in Beijing and be in Shanghai, 9 miles away, in 4.5 hours. That's like going from New York to Chicago, faster than most people's workday. And the train departs every 10 minutes. Not once a day, every 10 minutes. But here's what makes this genuinely insane. They built this network across every terrain type that exists. Through the Gobi Desert, where sandstorms bury tracks overnight. Through mountain ranges where they had to tunnel through solid rock for miles. Across permafrost in Inner Mongolia, where the ground shifts seasonally. Through regions with summer typhoons and winter blizzards. The engineering tolerances are so tight that if the track shifts by more than 1 millimeter, trains automatically brake. At 217 miles per hour, even a tiny deviation would cause a catastrophic derailment. So they built tens of thousands of miles of railway, where every centimeter had to be laser precise. 3 billion passenger journeys every year. That's nearly half of China's entire population riding high-speed rail annually. The system moves more people in a month than airlines move globally in the same time frame. And they're not done building. Not even close. But speed and scale are only part of the story. Because China just solved a problem that's threatened civilization for millennia. 7. South-North Water Transfer Project. China is literally moving rivers across an entire country. Northern China is dying of thirst while southern China drowns in monsoons. So China built 2,700 miles of canals to transfer 45 billion cubic meters of water every year from south to north. That's enough water to fill Lake Mead 5 times over, flowing through channels longer than the Mississippi River. 345,000 people were relocated. Entire towns demolished and flooded to create the reservoirs. And here's the insane part. The water has to cross the Yellow River without mixing with it. So they built tunnels beneath the Yellow River massive underwater aqueducts so southern water can pass underneath and keep flowing north. 100 million people in northern China now have water. Beijing, a desert city, with 22 million people, has reliable supply because of water traveling over 1,000 miles through artificial rivers. But moving water is only impressive until you see what China did to unify an entire region. Yangshan Deep Water Port. China built the world's largest port on islands that didn't exist. Yangshan Deep Water Port sits in the open ocean on artificial islands connected to Shanghai by a 20-mile bridge. This isn't a harbor. This is robotic automation handling over 40 million shipping containers every single year, more cargo than flows through Los Angeles and Long Beach combined. The cranes are unmanned. The trucks are driverless. The entire operation runs 24/7 with minimal human intervention, moving containers with computer precision in a facility built on land they created by dumping millions of tons of rock into the East China Sea. And they built it because Shanghai's natural harbor wasn't deep enough for modern megaships. So China just built new islands further out where the water is deep enough, then connected them to the mainland with one of the longest sea bridges on Earth. It's the most automated port facility ever constructed, and it processes more cargo than entire countries ship in a year. But moving containers is nothing compared to what China's building through the most dangerous terrain on the planet. 5. Sichuan-Tibet Railway. China is building a railway through a landscape, actively trying to kill it. The Sichuan-Tibet Railway will cross the Himalayas through some of the most geologically unstable terrain on Earth. We're talking about 621 miles, where 74% of the track will be either bridges or tunnels. Not because it's convenient, because there's literally no ground stable enough to lay track on. 10 major earthquake zones, active fault lines that shift without warning, landslides that can bury entire sections in seconds, avalanches, glacial floods, and altitude swings from 1,600 feet to over 14,000 feet in a matter of miles. They're drilling tunnels through mountains over 12 miles long, 12 miles of solid rock with temperatures inside reaching 120 degrees Fahrenheit and rock that's so fractured it can collapse at any moment. Workers are boring through geology that geologists said was impossible to tunnel through. And here's the truly insane part. Trains will have to carry supplemental oxygen systems because passengers will be climbing to altitudes where breathing becomes difficult. The entire railway will be pressurized and climate-controlled because the outside environment is hostile to human life. Over 250 tunnels, some of them are the longest and deepest railway tunnels ever constructed. When it's finished, you'll be able to travel from Sichuan to Lhasa in 13 hours a journey that currently takes over 40 hours by road through treacherous mountain passes. But this railway is just one piece of infrastructure. China's next project literally rewires how an entire nation is powered. 4. Shenzhen-Zhongshan Link. China is building an 8-lane highway underwater. The Shenzhen-Zhongshan Link includes a tunnel section that's 46 to 51 meters wide, the widest underwater tunnel ever built. 8 lanes of traffic inside a steel tube sitting on the ocean floor beneath the Pearl River Delta. And here's the part that sounds impossible. There's a highway interchange in the middle of the tunnel, the world's first underwater highway junction, where traffic merges and splits 130 feet below the surface. Each tunnel section weighs 80,000 tons. They built them on land, floated them out, then sank them into trenches on the seabed with millimeter precision. One misalignment, and the entire tunnel floods. This 15-mile crossing cuts a 2-hour drive to 20 minutes. But even this is nothing compared to what China's building along thousands of miles of coastline. 3. Offshore wind capacity. China is turning the entire ocean into a power plant. China is building 200 gigawatts of offshore wind capacity by 2030. That's more electricity than the entire United Kingdom consumes all from turbines planted in the ocean along thousands of miles of coastline. But here's the problem. This is typhoon territory. These turbines have to survive 150-mile-per-hour winds and ocean waves that can demolish steel. So, China engineered typhoon-resistant turbines that bend and flex in storms that would obliterate anything on land. They installed more offshore wind turbines in 2023 alone than the rest of the world built in the previous 5 years combined. But generating that much power means nothing if you can't move it thousands of miles across a continent. 2. Ultra-high voltage grid. China is transmitting electricity farther than anyone thought possible. China's ultra-high voltage grid operates at $p.m. $1, 100 kilovolts, the highest voltage power transmission on Earth. They're sending 12,000 megawatts of electricity over 2,000 miles with minimal power loss. That's like generating electricity in Los Angeles and powering New York City. The power lines cross deserts, mountains, and climb to altitudes over 16,000 feet in Tibet. At that height, the thin air makes electricity arc and spark unpredictably. Normal power lines would short-circuit and fail, so they engineered insulation and spacing that can handle extreme altitude while carrying enough power to light up entire provinces. This isn't just one line. It's a network of ultra-high voltage transmission lines, connecting renewable energy from the West Solar Farms in the Gobi Desert, hydropower from Tibet, wind farms in Inner Mongolia, directly to the industrial cities on the East Coast where the power is actually needed. They're solving the fundamental problem of renewable energy. Generation happens where people aren't, and consumption happens where generation can't. So China just built the infrastructure to move clean power across an entire continent. But even this grid pales in comparison to the tunnel they're planning. 1. Bohai Strait Tunnel. China is planning to build a tunnel 4 times longer than anything that exists. The Bohai Strait Tunnel will be 76 miles long beneath the ocean. The Channel Tunnel between England and France is 31 miles. China's planning something 4 times longer in an active earthquake zone with shifting tectonic plates and violent underwater currents. $36 billion to bore through 76 miles of seabed while managing water pressure that increases with every foot deeper they go. When finished, you'll drive from Dalian to Yantai in under an hour instead of taking a 4-hour ferry or 7-hour drive around the bay. They're already conducting geological surveys. The engineering challenges that would stop any other nation are just problems to solve. Because that's what every single project on this list proved. China doesn't ask if something's possible. They just build it. Longer, taller, deeper, faster, until the records they set become the starting point for the next impossible thing they're already planning.